Tell me when it comes up on. Well,
you're live.
I'm live. I'm live. Oh my gosh, I'm live. Well, I don't know if anyone's here yet, but if you are, hello. And I'm excited to be here. My first ever Facebook Live event. So,
Sound good to you?
people there?
No, it just says it on that hat. I don't know how to check though.
All right, well.
And my shoulder's kind of in the corner.
I don't care about that.
You don't care about that?
I'll just wait a few minutes for people to show up. All right. Facebook Live. You see me? Everybody showing up?
I don't know how to tell.
Yeah, we still got a few more minutes. Oh yeah, hello. There's a moderator. Oh, people are all over here. Okay, I'm starting. You're live. I'm live.
Oh, cool. Where are you getting those comments from?
Right over here.
Maybe I
All right, well, I have some questions that were sent ahead. So I'm Susan Kuzmitsky, and I want to welcome you to my first ever co-hosting with Blick Art Materials Facebook Live. All right, well, before I get into the actual painting, I'm going to answer some of these questions for you. So, what do you like most about being an artist? Well, I really like the lifestyle of being an artist. I have been able to see the world through color and light and pretty much set my own hours, which is the perk of it. The downside is there's never a steady income, but it's all well worth it. Number 2 question here on my paper is, how do you store pastel paintings and drawings without transferring them on other pages? Good question. They are a little fragile when you're done. You have to frame them under glass as you would a watercolor or a print. But there is a product called Glassine, and it's Glassine, and you can put that on top of the finished pastel. It's sort of like a wax paper sort of thing. It will protect them until you are ready to frame them. And you can put this on top of a piece of foam core or a hard drawing board, and you can actually layer them if you have storage problems or space problems until you want to do something else with them. How do I find inspiration? Number 3. Well, Ryan says, my microphone is a little fuzzy, and I don't know what to do about that. Okay, anyway, continuing on. How do I find inspiration? Well, I think you have to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary is a phrase I've heard from another artist that I studied with. And like, for instance, I take walks now more than ever since we're in this crazy pandemic. And I was walking in my neighborhood recently, and I noticed this funny little orange fire hydrant. And it was late in the day, and the sunlight on this little orange fire hydrant was so beautiful. And I thought, wow, just an ordinary little thing, it looks extraordinary. So that's not one example. I'm just looking at light and different times of the day. People inspire me. I see beauty everywhere. All right, number 4, do you have tips for starters? For beginners, the one thing I would say to beginners is don't buy cheap art materials. I get people that want to save money and it never works out good. You're just going to be battling with the materials on top of trying to learn a new medium. So spend the money and get the good quality product. You will be so much happier in the end. It's like buying cheap clothes. They're just going to wear out faster and you're going to have to buy twice as many. So that's how I look at it. Number 5, which artists are you most influenced by? Um, well, that's a good question. I love the American Impressionist painter, the French Impressionist painters. The pre-Raphaelites were during the Impressionist times in England, very romantic painters. Waterhouse, Malay, there's a whole long list of influenced. And then the present day, I have some really wonderful artists that I work with. Joe Paquette is one of my mentors. Number 6, and then I'm going to get into the painting because it's right at 2 o'clock right now. Do you have any artistic habits? One thing I can tell you is don't wait to be inspired to go paint. You have to paint, whether you feel like it or not, if you want to get anywhere in this crazy artistic endeavor. Okay. All right, so who do we have here? Let's see, hello, we have good afternoon from Cindy, and we have someone from the Philippines saying hello. What are we working on today? I'm going to do a landscape painting. Hello from France. Looking good, Susan. Thank you, Angie. Hi from Southern California. Savannah, Georgia. Karen. Hello from Florida. Hello from beautiful Oregon. San Francisco, Ohio. Chris. Hi, Chris. It looks perfect. Thank you. New York. Jennifer. Let's see. Boy, there's a lot of people coming on. Hi from Illinois. That's my hometown. I grew up in Chicago. I always loved painting but never had time. Well, I hear ya. Most of my students seem to be retired people that finally have the time. Do you spray your pastels before framing? Never. Do not spray your pastels at the end. It will darken the colors and you will not be happy. You have to frame them under glass. I can barely hear you. The volume on my phone is to the max. All right.
I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, I got my volume all the way up and I'll try and speak loudly, but most of it will be watching.
Yeah, I think next time if we would do this again, you might need just an external microphone as opposed to using your computer, you know?
I have a headset that I plug that in.
Let me know. Maybe not right now. The next time, I guess.
All right, well, I'm going to actually get started on the demo. So, I'm going to all right, I will try and speak loudly since I seem to be having microphone problems. I'll try and move myself closer.
I can personally hear you
I'm just sitting right here.
alright.
All right, so what I have here is a piece of UArt sanded paper. It is 400 grit. It is 8 by 12, and I have it taped down on all 4 sides so it won't flop around when I'm working. Big tip here for all of you. What I have underneath, right here, is a couple pieces of 2-inch wide masking tape that is taped and sticking out to be a dust catcher for my painting when the pastel dribbles down, which it will somewhat. I can it'll catch all the little dust that comes down and it won't make a mess, and I won't breathe it in. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of finding my center point, and I'm going to start with a pastel pencil. I have a Cretacolor. This one is a blue-gray color, and I'm going to use this to just map out my landscape. So I'm starting with very light and loose lines, I want to get the big shapes. I'm looking for big shapes here. Any questions coming in? You could just tell me them.
One question is, how do you seal your pastels?
No, seal. The only way with pastels is to frame them under glass. You can store them under the glassine, as I mentioned earlier. Glassine is a kind of almost like a wax paper that you can put right over the pastel until you're ready to frame it, to store it. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm just mapping out the big shapes.
And someone's asking, like, no sprays or anything, just the glass.
Just the glass, right. You can say who they are and where they're from, too.
Yeah. Gigi asked, do you underpaint? And what do you use?
Yes, Gigi asked if I underpaint. Well, hold on, Gigi, because that's what we're going to get to. Right now, I'm just mapping out where all my big shapes are going to be. That's step one. And step two, right now, I'm going to take some pastels. I'm starting with my hard pastels, and I'm going to lay them flat. And again, I'm thinking in big shapes. My analogy for this stage of the painting is, when we're little and we get jigsaw puzzles, and we have big clunky shapes. That's what I start with, like a little 2-year-old jigsaw puzzle. Big shapes, simplifying the shapes, simplifying the colors. One color in there for the mountain range. I'm going to get a different color, and I'm not pressing very hard. I'm pressing, I would say, medium pressure on here. I don't want to fill up the tooth of the paper, but I want to get some color for each area. And so that's my mountains and my faraway trees. I'm going to pick up, and also when I do this underpainting, I'm going to make the colors stronger and darker than I really want to end up with. And I go for like pretty much local color. So there's this beautiful orange, yellow-orange against the blue background mountains. Again, I'm simplifying. I'm not trying to get every different color. I'm trying to get a big overall pattern of color. And then there's these big trees. I'm going to just treat them as a kind of a big shape and not try and worry about the sky holes. I'm going to paint the overall shape of these big trees over on the far right. All right, and then we're going to start to lay some of that same color in that I just picked up for this beautiful glow on the water. Again, I'm laying the pastel flat. Any more questions coming?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. I just didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's all right. You can
There's
interrupt me.
questions about...
In case you're wondering, this is my son Jacob in the
hello,
studio
everybody.
with me.
Another person asked a question about framing. Like, do you do the framing yourself? And also, when it comes to the pastels, do you ask whoever does the framing to put spacers between the glass and the artwork? Or do you just have the glass right up to the artwork?
Well, that's a big controversial question. And you will probably find about a 50-50 split in the pastel world with framing with spacers, meaning so that it does not touch the glass, which you could do by matting it, or there's little spacers, little plastic little inserts that go between the glass and the painting. They're actually called spacers that you can get at your framer. And then there's a French way of framing it. It's a French technique, and it is putting the painting right on the glass and using acid-free framer's tape to sort of seal it all the way around. So you sort of create a moisture barrier, because that's the big scary problem. And if you talk to framers, they won't do that. I've done it myself on smaller paintings. Most framers are more comfortable with doing the spacers. So it's, both ways have worked for me. I haven't had any issues either way, luckily, fortunately. There's this really pretty greenish glow that I'm going to really exaggerate for the underpainting. So what I'm doing here, flipping back to the painting, is, again, laying strong, darker colors that I want to end up with. think I'm going to kind of forget about the little shrubby trees that are in the very foreground here for now. And I'm going to get very dark green. Well, it's almost going to look like black on your screen, but it's actually a very dark green in this foreground area.
So do you always use 400 grit paper? Do you have your favorite brands of paper and pastels?
My favorite brands. Well, I love the UArt sanded paper. I've also used Sennelier's pastel card. You can prep your own boards with gesso, like a gritty gesso, clear gesso. You can make your own surfaces, and I've done that. But this is kind of my go-to paper, this 400 grit. It's sort of, the UArt paper comes in different grits. The higher the number, the smoother the paper. So it would start at 320, which would be really rough, and go up to 800, which would be more smooth. And so the 400 that I use is sort of a middle, right in the middle, and that seems to work best for my style. And I really encourage my students, because I do teach, I really encourage my students to try a little bit of everything and see what feels right. As far as pastels, there's so many different brands on the market. When I first started pastel painting in the 70s, that was not the case. But now we have a huge amount of variety. My first love was Sennelier, my first soft pastels I ever used. I started with Rembrandts and nude pastels back in the 70s, but that's about all you could really get. And the very first soft pastels I ever used were Sennelier, and I just keep coming back to them because they're wonderful and buttery and consistent. All right, so now that I see that I have I just don't want any big spaces of color showing. So now that that's done, the next step now, step 3, so step 1 was drawing, step 2 is laying in the color. Step 3 is I'm going to take a brush, just a cheap, kids quality brush. You don't need to use an expensive good brush for this because it's sanded paper, it'll eat your brush. And I'm going to moisten the pastel I'm using Gamsol, which is a mineral spirit, as a solvent to create paint out of the pastels and move it around. Go ahead.
Someone was asking about the combining of two mediums such as watercolor and chalk pastels. So you do use water sometimes.
I do a lot of different kinds of underpaintings. I do watercolor underpaintings, I do acrylic underpaintings, I do even done oil washes as an underpainting. They will all take beautifully on this paper. It's just a very fast and fun way to get color on, and it allows me to get all this color on without filling up the tooth of the paper. So with this sanded paper, I will be able to get about probably 3, 4, 5 layers, depending on how heavy-handed I am or not. And so by doing this underpainting, I can lay in all my color and not even use up a layer of the grit, so to speak. So it's sort of like a free pass. And you don't need a lot of it. You can see sometimes if I get too much, I get drips, which in this kind of subject, I don't mind getting drips. If it was a portrait, I would be a little more cautious. Probably wouldn't want to drip right down the face, but here I can just kind of let it go and see what happens. And all right, who else is joining us?
Someone was asking, why did you choose pastels over other mediums, and what are your favorite characteristics about them?
Oh, good question. Well, I actually started in charcoal when I was learning, and then I learned my next medium was oils, more traditional. I had a traditional classical training at the American Academy of Art in Chicago, and then I went into watercolors, and it wasn't until after art school that I really wanted to learn more about pastels because very few people were teaching pastels back then. And I was just fascinated with them. Having the Art Institute of Chicago right near my school, I was able to go there and just Google over all the Impressionist painters, Degas, Monet, Cassatt, Mary Cassatt. What I'm doing now is I'm just dabbing this, mostly because it's a demo and I don't want to sit here while it dries. I'm trying to just soak up a little bit of it so that you can do that. So I'm going to have to take a break here, but what I'm going to do, what was that question? I started answering and I stopped.
That's just like what made you start pastels.
Anyway, okay, so I went out to study with a painter named Albert Handel, who is a very well-known pastel teacher. At the time, he was in Woodstock, New York. So I went out there to study with him, and he taught me about this mixed media, sanded surface way of working, and that was it. I was hooked. I love the immediacy of the pastel. I love that, what you see is what you get. It's a very forgiving medium. I can really alter this painting pretty much endlessly. It's a great way to learn color and value. So I'm going to show you a couple other finished paintings that I have while I'm letting this dry. This one, show up.
I believe it hasn't quite. You're about to show.
All right, there it is. Okay, this one is the Oregon coast, and I just really, really loved how that cloud pattern made like a bridge across the Sunset Bay and down on the southern coast of Oregon. This was also done just exactly how I'm starting this one is how I started that one. And then another one. This one started as a demo painting for one of my pastel classes, one of my Zoom classes. And it's just a beautiful Victorian-style home down in Southern Oregon. I was down there visiting. This one was also started with the alcohol wash, just like I'm doing now. And I'm a sucker for dappled light. I just love, love, love that romance of that dappled summer light. And I just love the movement and of the shadows and the way the flowers just in the greenery just kind of circle around, and it was a fun one. Then we have all right, this one is called Garden Vineyard, and it was done from photo reference from the most beautiful place that I was visiting. Oregon is full of beautiful vineyards and countryside. Again, we're back to the dappled light. Mixed media, same procedure that I'm doing this today. Any more questions that are coming up about it?
Yeah, totally. I just don't want to interrupt you.
Okay, hold on.
People have been asking all sorts of questions. There's one about using alcohol for drying.
I said okay, I might have confused you.
And Gamsol?
Gamsol is a mineral spirit. When I don't use Gamsol, I have Gamsol because I also paint in oils. If you don't paint in oils, then you won't have it. You don't have to run out and buy it. But you could get denatured alcohol or even isopropyl alcohol at the drugstore that will work the same way. The Gamsol I just have. It's a really good product. So any of those will work as a wash over the pastels to turn it into a paint, and enable you to move it around. And any more questions? I'm still letting this dry.
There's I don't know how to pronounce this, but do you use pastels and plein art?
Oh, plein air, yes.
Plein
pastels are a wonderful medium for plein air. I love plein air. For those of you that don't know, my son is not an artist, but he's...
Or a French student.
Plein air means out in the open. So there's a whole genre of painting on plein air. And pastels are wonderful to take out. I just was out yesterday painting a model in a beautiful park with some other artists, and it's very transportable. You pare down. You don't need to take a whole lot with you. You don't have to take much of anything but a little box of pastels, your easel, and a few pastel pencils, and you're good to go. And It's fast. It's a wonderful medium for plein air painting.
Uh,
I think I'll come back to you. Any more questions?
So,
Hi again. Now I'm back. I'm just letting this dry a little bit.
Do you start with soft pastels or semi-hard pastels, or do you build up?
All right. Do you start with hard pastels? Someone asked. It's sort of like if you're a painter, you would start with thinned out paint and you'd work up to thick paint. So with pastels, it's the same kind of thing. The pencils and the hard pastels are they're full of a lot of more binder, so they're firmer. And then as you work down to the soft pastels, you're going to find there's a lot more pigment and less binder, so that you're going to be able to get thicker. And you'll see when I get into the demo a little farther along, you'll see what I mean. So I do tend to start, very thin. So this wash that I just did, I'll flip back to it. It's just about dry. Makes it very thin, and then get that part. Okay, and I will be picking up hard pastels to begin with. I can pick up my soft pastels as well. I tend to have my students, if you're beginning in pastel, it's easier to control the hard pastels. They're just easier to control. As soon as you pick it up, you would feel the difference. You can use the hard pastels or the soft pastels if you have a light touch. And the more experience you have and the more you work with the medium, you'll understand the touch and how much pressure to apply, because it makes a difference. All right, I think this is not dry, but let's see if I can dab it a little bit more. Let's get a few more questions answered.
Yeah, and so Sommelier is definitely your favorite brand as far as like the one you recommend for people to use. What grit is best for portraits?
All right, I'm going to come back to my face again since I'm still waiting on this to dry. Portraits I would use, I don't do much different than what I'm doing here. I'd be more drawing in the beginning with my pencils, more accurate. If you saw me start this, I was just doing a couple really quick gestural lines. So if it's a portrait, I start the same. I don't really have a different procedure. It's just a little more refining and a little more layering up to the skin tones that I want. But working pencils, hard pastels, soft pastels, and then I do a lot of blending with the pastel pencils.
Roxanne wanted to ask, do you mount your paper on board to stop bulking when doing a wet underpainting?
All right, this paper, what I have on here right now is not mounted. I have it taped all the way around. Here, I'm going to cut back to it. Yeah, I've taped it all the way around on all four sides, so it's not going to wiggle around. I can still mount it when I'm done if I want. I do often mount my paper onto gator board, and I use a product. Which one under you can get? Big white piece of paper. Yes, I use a product that's called Scotch 568 Positional. Yeah.
That's a camera,
Yeah, here it is. Well, you could probably put it in the notes at the end. It's a positional mounting adhesive. Paper I used to use was a double-sided sticky paper, and the person that I used to get it from went out of business. He was my photographer. The pandemic kind of put him out to business, so I don't really have a way to get that anymore. So I switched to this Scotch brand product, and it works really great. You put it in between the board and the paper, and it comes with instructions, so I won't get into that on this demo. This is not drying. It must be very humid out here today.
And we had a couple of questions about the technique of smudging, and you seem to do that intentionally.
Well, I think we're going to get into that as soon as this darn underpainting gets dry enough that I can work on it again, and I will show you rather than tell you. It's a lot easier if I can show you.
Let me ask a different question then. Someone was asking about what do you think about pastel board?
I like that. Pastel board is a good product. It's a little more expensive than buying the paper and mounting it yourself. So that, but the boards are wonderful. It depends what your budget is for art supplies, I would say. I'm trying to soak up this a little more because for some reason it's just very hot out here today and it's taking its time drying. All right, I'm going to come right back in to my center of interest, which is the sky and the water right in here. I'm going to build my painting out from my center of interest. So I'm coming right on top of the layer of underpainting that I did.
Someone was asking about pastel paintings shedding pastel powder when they're finished. Is that a thing that all of them do?
You know, the sandpaper really grabs the pastel. It really grabs it. You won't get a lot of fall off. You really won't. That's one of the perks of using the sanded paper. Okay, this is finally dry. So I'm coming back in here. I'm going to layer up some more color on here now. I'm laying my pastel flat on here. And I do use my fingers, so I like to, blend lightly. I don't do over smudging kind of stuff. And I want to come down here and get some lighter colors on top of this dark under wash that I have. So I'm going to start to build up layers, building up to the light. I don't start with the lightest color because I want to build up to the light. So this is a couple values lighter than what I put on there. You can start to see the layering starting to happen.
Can you use watercolor paper for this, or do you need like a stronger color paper?
Watercolor paper will work. I know a few artists that use only watercolor paper as their base, and it works just beautifully. So if you're already a watercolor painter, you can use your watercolors as an underpainting, and you can use your watercolor paper as a surface. In fact, I used to teach when I would teach a multiple day workshop locally, wherever I was, I would have students bring in a bombed out watercolor painting and kind of bring it back to life with pastels right on top of it. And it's really a fun experiment, and you can get some beautiful, beautiful results working that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can use pastels on like any sketchbooks of like thick, like healthy paper.
If you use like paper, like Hanson or Strathmore, charcoal kind of papers, it works, but you're not going to be able to get as many layers on there. So what I'm showing you can't really do the underpainting because it will buckle the paper. And you just won't be able to layer. I switched when I first started. I didn't even know about sanded papers, so I was using the Canson, regular paper.
And how do you like to create like a hazy, blurry effect?
All right, well, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that?
We're going to get to a hazy, blurry effect up in the sky here as soon as I get some more
cool.
pastel on it, so hang tight.
Yes. And how long does it normally take you to do a pastel painting?
The other thing I love about pastels is how fast it is, because I'm a pretty impatient person, as my son right here will attest to. Huh? Right?
I get it.
And I just like fast, and I find that pastels go really fast. Again, I've been doing it for many years, so the immediacy is what attracts me to this medium. I don't have to wait for things to dry, except the underpainting, obviously, but once I get into color, like I am now, it moves along pretty quick. So here, up in the sky, I'm going to show you in a minute. I just have to get a little more color on here before I can get into that part. So I'm going to start to mellow out some of these colors, because as I said in the beginning, I lay harder, more intense and darker colors that I know I'm going to end up with on purpose, so I can layer up to the light.
And after the final project, do we like seal this with anything to avoid the color bleeding?
No, colors won't bleed. Again, back to what I said, the only way to really, really preserve a pastel ultimately is to frame it under glass. So here we are. I'm going to start to lighten up some of these colors on the water. Now it's really dry. Because before it wasn't dry, and you can tell when it dries when you're doing this at home, because in your studio, because it just sort of sucks the pigment. It sucks the pigment right back in. Now it's like laying on top, which is what I was waiting for. So here we go. We're going to start to create like this beautiful glow on the water. These kind of Monet-ish colors. And kind of maybe get some of these pinks that are coming in from the sunset over here. It's got a little wet down here, but you can leave me some more questions too.
Yeah, people are seeming to really enjoying what you're doing. Some of you have asked about classes that you offer.
Oh yes, well, you know, this whole new world now of Zoom makes it so much more accessible to teach people from wherever you are. So if you go to my website, which I believe is listed somewhere on there, but it's susankozitsky.com. I have a tab on there for classes and workshops. And I have weekly classes on Zoom, and I have longer workshops, like multiple day workshops on Zoom. And I also do one-on-one mentoring if the class is not something that you want or can't do. I do some good one-on-one kind of things.
And I posted the website on the comments for you.
All right, so over here where there's real beautiful drama, where the sun is really breaking through, that's where I can really come in. This is a sommelier, very soft. It's like a yellow-white. It's a beautiful color. And I'm going to come in here and start to cut in between these clouds. There's a little bit of it peeking in up here, and a little bit more down in the water. So now here, down here I got this kind of dark blobby area. Oftentimes what happens when I lay in the color and then I put the wash over it, I lose some of the drawing. So I can kind of come back in, and I think I'm going to do that just to show you. I'm taking a light pencil here. I just sort of want to, yeah, actually that's too light. I won't be able to see it. I'll go back to this pencil and just sort of remap out where I want this land. And I think I don't like this here. I don't like this here. So what am I going to do if I don't like it? What to do? So this is what I can do. I can brush it down. I can take a dry brush, and I can kind of brush off. It's good to have a stiff brush. Just brush down any extra pastel on there. And what I want to do is I want to come in right on top of it. So you work from dark to light in pastels. So I can just carve right back on over this. And kind of pull in this shoreline over here, which I like better. So, like I said earlier, it's a very forgiving medium. It's very flexible. You can make all kinds of changes. If I don't like something, I can take a brush and I can brush it down and I can build it up again. If I do like something and I have saturated the paper, meaning that I filled up the tube of the paper, then I can use the spray. That is the only time you will see me pick up a can of spray fixative. That is the time to spray the painting, and that will create a whole new layer, a gritty layer on top. And then you can apply the more pastel on there. So that's a good tool to use. It's fixative, but never, never, never at the end of the painting, because it'll just darken the colors. I don't care if it darkens the colors while I'm still working. Sometimes it's an advantage to doing that. All right, so right over here, there's these really beautiful sunsetty colors that drift right into one another. And I'm going to show you now that I have some stronger color on here. Here I'm picking up kind of a grayish purple to kind of pull these two areas together so they don't have such a hard edge, because it's a very soft transition in the photo. And I'm going to put some of the same purple up in here, some of it up in the clouds. I want to soften some of this dark in the clouds here. I'm going to soften it down. Alright, so get this really strong orange coming behind these blue sunset colors. And you see me use my finger kind of tapping it to soften the edge up here. But the other wonderful way to soften and blend colors is with the pastel pencils. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to take the pencil, kind of skating over this. And you will see that it will start to blend without losing what's underneath it. You just want to kind of harmonize the colors and pull them together without losing the beautiful layering of color. Especially on this pink over here, I want to push it back a little bit, but I don't want it to disappear. So by doing this, instead of taking my finger and over blending, I can still maintain that glow, which is one of the things I love about pastel. And then here we go with some really light lights now. I'm going to really show you how you work to this, up to the soft pastels to get texture at the end. It's really, I want to kind of follow this up again and get some really whites on top of what I already have. You kind of follow it, it kind of dribbles down right here, right straight above it. And I want to sort of mellow out this over in the corner, so I'm picking up like a kind of a grayer yellow on top of the bright yellow that I initially had on there. And I'm going to start to carve out the shape of this tree, getting some of the sky holes in there. And then, let's see here, I'm going to get rid of some of this dark stuff in there. So, let's see here. All right, any more questions coming in?
Yeah. Someone's asking about when it's done and you want to fix it.
Well, we keep going back to that question. I think we should just post it. Some of you that have come on later, like I said earlier, you don't want to spray your paintings with fixative. You want to frame them under glass to preserve them. The fixative will not fix it.
Yeah.
So now, again, going over these dark blue colors, so they still come through, but they want to be softer. So I have it's a gray, it's like an umbery kind of gray color. I don't want that intense blue up there.
Someone was asking how do you sharpen pencils?
Oh.
I guess it's a big.
That's a big deal.
I wasn't expecting that to be an action.
I have tried every pencil sharpener that anyone has ever recommended to me, and they all work great in the beginning until the gears, the little insides, wear out. Because I paint a lot and I use my pencils a lot, and most pencil sharpeners, they're not built for that. So, what I recommend is an X-Acto knife and a sand pad. So you're going to take it and you're going to sharpen it to a point, like whittling it, like a wood carver, and then you're going to scrape it along flat on the sanded paper, on the sandboard, or sandpaper. These are really convenient. Until you get a nice pinpoint. And it's a pain in the butt. Sorry, but that's the only thing. That is where I have my dream of having an assistant that will clean my pastels at the end and put them all back in their little place and sharpen up my pencils. But
there's an open call for anyone living in Portland then. Someone's saying that they use razor blades.
Yeah, razor blade works too. Razor blades work too.
Someone asked you, what do you apply after completion to make it stay? And you may have already asked.
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Yes, nothing. You have to frame it under glass. You can store it.
Yes.
You can store it with the glassine or like a wax paper underneath it. Or yeah. Sometimes I would take, if I'm shipping a painting, which if I sell something and if it's a small to medium painting, I have also used cellophane bag. you know, the things that you put greeting cards in. It's not ideal, but it will work to transport them. You just have to be really, really careful upon removing them that you don't smear your picture, pulling it out of the bag. But if you want to store it and be able to look at it and view it, that's a good option too until you're ready to frame it. But just don't use the spray. Don't use the spray. All right, we're going to just cut in some of this more into this shoreline here with these beautiful light colors.
I love the green you used for that. I really just watching it come up.
Right, so again, I'm layering up to this really light light that's on this on the lake here. Really, really working my way up to it. And again, if I don't want to, looking for one of my lighter pencils. I think I'll use a pink here. Instead of smudging it and smearing it with my finger, I often like to use the pencils to just soften it down. But you can't do that till you already have some pastel on there. All right. Any more questions coming in?
Say it.
Any more?
A lot of people are just saying they love this.
No, I love that. I love that they love it. I'm happy that they love it. Again, so I do use my finger sometimes. Don't over smudge, don't over blend. Alright.
Were you using a dark green or a black on the right side when you were doing the trees?
Good question. I have not used any pure black at all in this painting. What I have, I don't know if you can see, it's a very dark purple. And I had a very dark green that I wish you'd put on there, but it's not black. There's a lot of very dark values that you don't have to use pure black. Black can be very dense. Yeah. So these are the very darkest darks that I'm putting in along the shoreline up closer to me.
Beautiful work. Can't wait to try this. Pastels are very cool.
Pastels are very cool.
You're gonna love reading all these comments.
Pastels are very cool. And like I said, I think it's a great medium to learn color for beginners. I found out that after I worked in pastels, you know, as I said earlier, if you came on early, I worked in oils first, and then watercolors, and then pastels. And I would probably reverse that if I had started over and picked up pastels first. But after studying pastels for years, I went back to oils, and my colors were so much cleaner and pure. I'm working with all this pure color. I'm going to keep working, again, I'm layering up. So the big mistake people sometimes make, often in the beginning, is getting too light too fast. So you can see I've really held back, and I'm really gently working my way up to the light.
Can you get the same layering effect without wetting paper and just using dry pastels?
Yes, you can. You can. I just, I think that I become so used to doing the washes because it's so fast, and then, like I said earlier, also you get to kind of get a free pass on the filling up the paper. You get a lot of extra kind of room to play around with the color. But sometimes if I go out to paint and I don't want to take anything else with me, I'm just doing a real quick outdoor painting, I won't even bother. I'll just go straight into the pastels.
What are you doing right now?
I'm just kind of playing around, adding some more detail on the sky. Is that your question or someone else's question?
Yeah.
That's great. I don't think my son has ever seen me really do a full demo. Have you, Jacob?
Not a full demo. I've seen you paint plenty of times. Not from like start to beginning. Start to end. Start to beginning.
All right, let's see here. So, What are we doing? We got a quarter to two already. My oh my. No, it's a quarter to four. Quarter to three here.
Yeah.
We're on Central Time.
Quarter to three. Quarter to four. Quarter to something.
All right, so you can see that I'm laying in different colors, which is close in value back in these faraway mountains. I have a blue on there, and I'm putting in a kind of a mauve, dusty purple color, but it's the same value, so it lays right in there. Right in there.
Someone's asking what brand of pencil are you using?
I have a lot of Cretacolor pastel pencils that I have in my box here. There's other brands available. I like the Cretacolor a lot. I like their color range.
And I have a couple more questions. When working on watercolor paper over previous painting, do you put anything on before the pastels?
Nope. Just suck it to it. Just hit it with the pastel. You'll have a lot of fun doing that, and you can really bring a bombed out watercolor painting back to life. Try it out and you'll see. It's really fun. And fun is important, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Especially in these times that we're living in. We need to find things that are fun, and painting and working with color is very therapeutic and very good for our whole being. Okay, let's see what else I want here. Get some lighter greens and these trees that are in the middle ground here. Again, I'm laying it flat. I have a little piece. I always break my pastels. You're never going to work with a big full stick. You want to break it. And it's sort of like learning your own handwriting, your method of handwriting. You try out different shapes, and everybody's hand will be different, and you'll hold the pastel different, and you will find your rhythm, and you'll find your, how you like to hold the pastel. And you can manipulate it around. You'll see me, I do flat strokes, I do like kind of dotty, so quick little short hashes, turn my arm to go in the same direction as the form that I'm painting. I'm going to address this front meadow field a little bit, this hillside. It's catching some of the light, which will harmonize the color and the water, bring it forward. The foreground needs some work. So I think I will pick up a pencil, a dark pencil, and kind of see this dust down here. Alright, so there's a dark pencil. I'm just going to kind of indicate some of these little shrubby guys down here. And do a little pattern of branches, and it's a little more straggly down in here. And I also want to put in, using my pencil again, I'm going to put in these piers that are in here. And they get lighter as they go back. I'm going to pick up a lighter pencil. Alright, so these pencils come in handy for this kind of detailed skinny stuff. And they do the fade away as they go away. So and basically I could use the same pencil with less pressure as I go back. And I think I'm going to also darken down at the bottom of this land here a little bit. So I'm taking this dark purple again. Just going to accentuate it a little bit. Soften it up. And I really kind of like some of the reflection coming down. This one really shows reflections. The other ones kind of fade away. Any more questions?
I'm trying to see here. I'm getting a little disconnected internet noise.
Oh, we got to get on the office.
Oh, I was on it. Nothing new yet.
We got like 10 minutes left. Alright, let's keep going here. Now I'm going to kind of carve out this area down here, kind of needs some help. So I'm going to kind of carve around these scrubby little bushes, trees.
So do you always use work with your paper upright like you have it?
Yes, it's very important because if you, I don't think you can see, but when I look down on my tape that I use as a dust catcher, there's a bit of dust on there from stuff dribbling down, and if I were laying it flat, that dust would just fall right back onto my painting, which would not be good. So yes, you know, if you're coming from the world of watercolors, you're used to working flat, but with pastels, as with oils and acrylics, you work upright. I'm going to add a little bit of this kind of rusty color to the tops of these trees to kind of catch the glow of the sun.
Yeah, people have been asking about like the way you hold your pastels and pencils. Is it like, is it just something you kind of developed just based on your own need?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be holding my pastel pencil like I hold a pencil if I'm writing. I would be holding my pastel pencil like I would be holding a paintbrush. And sort of the same with the pastel stick itself. But as I said, you kind of have to find your groove with it. You try different ways of applying it. Your mark making, I guess, is the term I'm looking for here. So you would just be able to experiment and find different ways to move it, how hard to press. Pressure is a big deal, you know, because you could take the same color and you get a darker value if you press harder on the pastel. So that's another fun thing. I sometimes will take my pencil in the direction, like there's these kind of scrubby little meadow flowers on here, and I could just turn my hand and my pencil to follow the form.
And I guess if you want to, people have been asking, if you just want to like clearly go over some of the brands you've been using, just so people know.
All right. If you go to my page that Blick just put up for me, I think it's in the notes. It's somewhere in there. Not my website, but my page of Blick. At the bottom of that page, it will list the products I use. But if you don't do that, then I will tell you that I have a set of Sommelier soft half sticks. Sommelier makes a lot of different set configurations, and their half stick set is a really good deal. I just tell my students to buy the largest sets you can afford. I don't presume to know people's budget for art supplies, but the more the merrier. I wouldn't get less than a box of 30 and the half stick set of the Sommelier pastels. And the same with the Cretacolor hard pastels and the Cretacolor pencils, which is what I've been using mostly. Again, they come in different set sizes, and I would just say get the biggest size that your budget allows for, because you will not be upset. You will not regret it. If you have too little, you're gonna be frustrated, and you're gonna want more anyway. And I have to warn you, pastels are highly addictive. You will just fall in love. And they're a very good antidote for stress and depression. That's my non-medical advice.
How many layers can you make?
Well, that's a good question too. I think you can, again, in the beginning, I don't, for beginners usually are kind of heavy-handed, unless you've already been painting and you're a little used to being like a light touch. Once you develop your light touch, you can get 3, 4, 5 layers on here. And then again, like I said earlier, you can use the spray to create additional layers, or you can brush it off and continue working up, building up. Okay, I think I'm going to come back to me, and so we can wrap it up here, because we're getting up to the top of the hour.
You should also, if you could show them the whole setup. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, okay.
Of
You
like
can do
how you have your what your.
Yeah, so hi everybody. Now we're back in my studio view here. So down below here, yes, I will do that in these last few minutes. I'm going to turn my camera over this way and show you. Am I showing you? What am I showing you? Why is it not showing? Oh, because I have to go to my webcam. That's why. Sorry, I'm still learning this stuff. All right, that's what I'm going to do. Get me out of there. We don't need to see me. We already saw me. Okay, there we go. So I have a small study of this painting that I did down here. And I have my large palette over here. Here's my pencils. Is this showing up all right? All right, so I have my pastels in a carry box, and they're divided by colors, dark to light. Dark's at the top and light's coming down. So when I'm working across my palette, I can pull any colors in different value ranges, or middle values, or my lights. And then over here in front of me, shift back over, down below under my painting is where I have what I call my working palette. So I pulled colors out that I'm using for this painting, and I keep them in a little container right in front of me. And then at the end of the painting, that's where I want my assistant, whoever that person may end up being, to come and clean them up. Cleaning them up basically just means taking a paper towel, because they get a little dusty. So just taking a paper towel to wipe them off. And then they go back in the big box. And that's about it. So let's see if there's any final questions on there. Any final questions?
I'm looking right now. Create the color pastel soft, medium, or medium hard.
Say that again? Krita?
Is Krita color pastels?
Oh, Krita colors are hard pastels. They make hard pastels, and they make pastel pencils.
Probably the hardest question is, when do you know when you're done?
When do you know when you're done? That is the question. That is a really good question. I usually have to come back the next day, look at it another time, turn it around, step away, ask one of my other artist friends. I can tell you when your painting's done a lot better than I can tell myself when my painting's done. There's some that you just know. You just can feel it's done. There's one phrase I've heard it over and over, that a painting is never finished, it's simply abandoned. So, it can go on and on, but at some point you have to be done, sign it, and go on to the next painting. So, anyway, I think I want to really thank Blick Art Materials. Shout out to Ryan, who got me through this. And thank them for all their help and support. And this was just really fun, and I'm thrilled to be able to do this, and I hope I'll be back again. And if you have any more questions, you can contact me through my website. It's susankosmitsky.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or find me on Facebook and ask me questions. And gosh, this was really a good experience. I hope you enjoyed it. Is there any last comments on that I can answer? Well, I'm going to not keep this on my face. You don't need to see me. You probably want to see the painting.
Thank you. When do you frame? Do you frame with a mat?
I don't use, well, sometimes I use mats. It really depends. It depends on the painting. I don't always use a mat, and I can't say I never use a mat. Oh, good. Okay, sorry. I'm making everybody dizzy. Yeah. So anyway, I think we're just up at the hour here, and I'm screwing this up anyway. Come and join me at a class, or, in my classes, I do a lot of demos in my classes, so you can keep watching, and I do different underpainting approaches as well. So, again, thanks to Blick, and happy painting!